yours, so get in touch and let me know. But next up, did the media censor information when reporting COVID? A group of 30 journalists who think it did have had a letter published in the influential Press Gazette. The group, who call themselves Holding the Line, say reporters didn't question officials like the World Health Organization enough. So joining me now to talk about this is one of them, Sonia Elijah, plus Neil Wallis, who is a media commentator and former deputy editor of The Sun. Elijah, just give, if you will, my viewers a sense of the letter that you wrote and what is your concern?
Our main concern is that what we're getting from the mainstream media is just one official narrative. We're not getting a sort of balanced view, and I find that to be quite damaging. I feel the public need to be told the whole story, the whole truth, and not a filtered down version of it. So we feel that the playing field needs to be levelled for a balanced debate, and that's been sorely missing this past year.
Elijah, before I bring in Neil, what is it specifically you think has been missing?
So that's questions to me.
Mm-hmm.
What's been missing is, so for example, even the science, let's take masks. So what we're seeing on the mainstream media is, how masks are highly effective for preventing transmission, but that actually isn't the case. There hasn't been one randomized control study done that proved that masks have been effective. The only one done was in Denmark, which proved that they were not effective. What else has been, I say, sort of the media has kept silent on is the early treatment for COVID with drugs like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. That's been really suppressed. And just the way there's also the whole mass testing program. I've written many investigative reports looking at the intravenous flow test, also the PCR test. And a lot of the mainstream media has been silent on that when the FDA just a few weeks ago said the intravenous flow test should be thrown in the bin because it's highly inaccurate and unreliable. But a lot of the mainstream media here has sort of been silent on that. And the MHRA here has been silent too, because they have just extended their emergency authorization use for the lateral flow test.
And Neil, how would you respond to what Sonia is saying there? Do you think the media has been basically censoring the information that we've been provided with, not just the mainstream media, by the way, but also some of the tech giants as well?
The problem here is we have a classic conspiracy theory. It's the sort of classic conspiracy theory that come from weird organizations like QAnon, for instance. And essentially, what they're complaining about is something that hasn't happened. And so what this little group, none of whom I've heard of, incidentally, I've never heard of this organization before.
I'll give you a real quick example of something that is genuine that I can list off the top of my head, and I'm sure Sonia will have many others. For example, this whole lab leak theory, that was censored pretty much everywhere, and now you couldn't even discuss it. It was shut down, and now it's finally been looked at.
Michelle, with the greatest of respect, I suggest you go back to last Sunday's Mail on Sunday and read yet another piece by Ian Burrell, who has written consistently, page after page, spread after spread, about the Wuhan Chinese cover-up. The idea that the mainstream media has not covered the shenanigans of the Chinese government, the idea that the mainstream media has not covered the way that the World Health Organization is so massively in hock to the Chinese government, the idea that the mainstream media, who sent dozens upon dozens of journalist camera crews to Wuhan when the WHO group went and reported day after day how they were blocked from reporting, is just silly.
So, Sonia, basically, Neil's saying...
the idea that the Wuhan leak has been covered up is laughable. I mean,
right, there you go, Sonia.
Silly.
This concept of censorship, laughable, silly, nonsense, says Neil.
No, I was referring to your specific.
Oh, you're talking about mine?
Yeah.
Well, I'll blame it on you anyway, Sonia.
Yeah, well, there we are.
Unfortunately, the concept of censorship is very real. We have the Trusted News Initiative that cuts across all big tech, big media, and they have a war going on against misinformation, disinformation. I interviewed Dr. Robert Malone just recently. He is the inventor of mRNA technology. He is a vaccine expert. The interview, after I posted it on YouTube, within the space of a few hours, it was removed. Because he mentioned the adverse effects of these experimental gene therapy treatments, which is what the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are, because they've classified that as such. So that's being removed. You have the ivermectin, like I was saying, the early treatments for COVID that have proven to be highly effective, that have saved lives, that the mainstream media has completely gone silent on. You mentioned the lab leak. Well, a few months ago, 6 months ago, if you were to talk about that, you would be labeled as a lunatic. So
untrue.
It's nice
Just
to see. It's nice to see that recently the mainstream media are taking that into account. But investigative journalists like myself, we are a rare species, unfortunately.
He's shaking his head there, Neil. Go on.
So what we have here, essentially, my guess is that this is a group of people who are basically anti-vaxxers. They're basically anti the lockdown. I'd love to know, I mean, as you know, most of this group have kept their names secret. There's only 4 names I know of. This is a group that, if you look at their case, that the example they use in their letter is a group of people who don't like the main thrust of the fight against COVID. The truth of the matter is, in this country, that there's been a whole number. They mention a couple of drugs, for instance, that they object to the fact that the media aren't championing them. All that happened is, at various times, various drugs come into the mainstream, and then the medical world decides what will and will not work. 4 million people have died because of COVID. The idea that anybody is going to cover up a useful drug is simply nuts. It's just nuts.
Well, I've got to say, I could personally continue this conversation for much, much longer, but unfortunately, for time reasons, I'm going to say that you two probably will not agree, and this is a conversation that we'll have again, I'm sure. But for now, Neil and Sonia, thank you both for your time.